Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Secure 9000 Integration with CertiPath High Assurance Visitor Management Solution. My name is Kelsey Burke, and I'm the product manager of our OEM solutions for Software House. Verifying the identity of visitors in the areas they subsequently access is a cornerstone of converged security. The joining of Secure 9000 and the CertiPath Trust Visitor is the ideal solution for this application. Our expert panelists today will give you an overview of Trust Visitor and then take you through a comprehensive demonstration within Secure 9000. Our panelists today from the CertiPath team are Jeff Negrini. He's the president and founder. We have Justin Garrison with us as well, one of the product managers. Dan Mieslewski, the vice president of sales and marketing. Please note that the webinar is in listen-only mode. So if you have any questions, we will be taking them throughout the presentation. Please just add questions using the GoToWebinar control panel. The webinar is being recorded, so a link will be sent to all the attendees after the webinar concludes. I'll now turn the webinar over to Brian Kordoff.
Hello, thank you, Kelsey, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Kordoff, Director of Sales for Software House for North America. Wanted to thank everybody. Wanted to first thank everyone for attending the webinar today. I know we're all busy and going through a difficult time around the world, but I do want to just say thank you to the team. Also want to thank the CertiPath team for their time. Great partnership here. Want to continue to grow this and see how we can come and meet the customers' needs out there in the world. So I'm actually going to pass this off to Jeff and just wanted to say thanks from the Software House sales team and the product management team as well. Thank you. Jeff, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Brian. Thanks to Software House and Johnson Controls and to the whole group for this. So yeah, welcome everyone to a session where we're going to demonstrate Trust Visitor 3.0. We released this, it's our latest version 21 days ago. And as luck would have it, this is the first major gathering that's going to get to see it. So we're really excited about getting to show it to you guys today and in this way. We definitely practiced it, should go just fine. And you know, I think probably many of the people who joined today work outside of the Beltway here in DC, so you may not be as familiar with CertiPath. So we wanted to spend just a minute, in fact, the first 5 minutes today, telling you just a little bit about CertiPath and why we make a high assurance visitor management system. So I started CertiPath back in 2004 as a digital identity company. You know, before that was an in vogue thing. I was focused on how you could make identities work across large aerospace and defense companies, make those interoperable not only with themselves, but also the US Department of Defense and ministries of defense around the world. Joint Strike Fighter was a big thing back then, and we were trying to secure that. And so what you're hearing is, how do we make digital identities work within each other's respective IT systems? And there's a lot of strong parallels between trying to do that and what high assurance visitor management system is. And that's something I want you to keep in mind as you look at what we've done here today. So CertiPath's mission today is still largely that. It is this idea that we're still a digital identity company. We're still trying to help people use credentials that can be trusted broadly outside of their own organization in an ecosystem of trust. But we want those digital identities to do more than we did back in 2004. We still expect them to work in logical access control systems, but we also want them to work in physical access too. So we think that in situations where you can have the same credential doing both, that's the best case scenario. It's not always going to be the case, but we definitely strive to hit that. CertiPath today operates in 3 distinct business units: our PKI bridge, our services arm, and our product arm. So let me just show you what a PKI bridge actually means very quickly. Let me cue up a little video from one of our products called Trust Monitor, and I'll give you some sense. So at least as of yesterday when I made this, that was the trust fabric. You may have heard of things like the Federal Bridge or even the CertiPath Bridge before. There it is in real time as of yesterday. And there's the part that just supports those smart cards that federal government people wear around, like the PIV cards or the DoD Common Access cards. And you can see that there is a CertiPath Bridge involved in this as well. We're one of the people. I like to use credit cards as an example. Think about Visa or MasterCard. There's not a bunch of those, but obviously there's a massive number of issuing banks underneath those guys that participate in the Visa, MasterCard, or whatever network. So PKI bridges are just like that. The Federal Bridge is a well-known one. CertiPath is a well-known one. And SAFE in the healthcare space is a well-known one. And in fact, we just acquired that recently. So we now do both aerospace and defense and healthcare. Now, as it relates to the services side of our organization, I put this together for you. We try to act or take a role with our clients where we are augmenting their staff, acting as their agent on their behalf. It always relates to digital identity in some form or fashion, but as you can see, it can go in a lot of different directions. This has been a very, very popular space for us to play in. Here's an example of some of the people that we have. Oh, actually, here, do this. Let me show you some of our products. So there is Trust Monitor. You just saw the graphic swirling around. That's the thing that keeps tabs on everything that's going on in the Trust Fabric every minute of every day and has been for more than 10 years. This other one, DLT Gateway or Distributed Ledger Technology, you may also know it as something called blockchain. We did this for the Department of Homeland Security. It allows somebody to participate in multiple blockchains simultaneously. And then you can think of it as a big data play. You can collate all the data and do something useful with data coming in from multiple blockchains. It's particularly a big deal at Customs and Border Protection, but there's lots of use cases for it. It is also the first time we've ever put a major piece of software into open source. So we're looking forward to seeing what the community can do with that. And then the last one, our flagship product, is Trust Visitor. That's the one that we're going to demonstrate for you today. Now, Trust Visitor is already installed in several other agencies, several agencies, I should say, also in several highly regulated companies. I put this chart together yesterday with just some logos off the top of my head. I'm sure it's not an exhaustive list, but it just gives you a sense that, for having done this for 16 years, we've managed to get what I would consider some pretty blue chip customers in the security space. So let's talk for a moment about high assurance visitor management. Just exactly what the heck does that mean? So high assurance visitor management to me is that as a facility owner, I get to know who's in my facilities at what time and where and on whose authority across the board. That sounds like a goal that should be the case for all visitor management, but it rarely is. And then if you layer onto it that I don't necessarily want to be giving out paper badges or stickers to people. I would really rather that they have a credential that interacts with my access control system. Well, that gets more interesting yet. And then you have to consider, well, all right, but what if I have a meeting at a location in one of my buildings and some of my people that are coming are employees but don't routinely visit this location? Or they're employees and they are at this location on a routine basis, but they don't normally get to go to this floor or to this area of this floor, and there is access control. How am I dealing with that? And so Trust Visitor is able to, and you're going to see in just moments, is able to parse through every meeting invite you make and understand whether somebody is truly a visitor from outside your organization or they're a visitor from inside your organization. And what about if I have an employee who forgot their credentials today? Well, they look a lot like a visitor as well. And so those are all things that we had to consider when we were making a high assurance visitor management system. There are a number of things that we've had to do to integrate to make this all hang together. Sure, we have to integrate with a physical access control system, and Sure, we have to integrate with a validation system if you're using PKI credentials, which a lot of high assurance places are. But background checks, that becomes a big deal. So we'll tell you a little bit about that. And beyond email, we are almost at every implementation integrating with their Active Directory. And that gives us a lot of ability to do smart things with employees. So we're going to show you some of that too. We also, at least for now, are the only system that implements all of the visitor management requirements currently in place for the US federal government. This is something known as NIST Special Pub 801.16-1, but suffice it to say, that's a nice thing to be able to say right now that we're the only ones who do that. And then the last thing to share with you before I'm going to kick it over to Justin is that without a doubt, Secure was our first, arguably our best integration. It works with all the recent versions and service packs. It also works with Mass SaaS, and it works with the Intermetrics validation system. We also have, as of Trust Visitor 3.0, integrated with this FedCheck ident solutions. It's currently in our view, the darling of the federal space for background checks. And so we are really pleased that we managed to make that part of the COTS product. If there are background check solutions that other people like, we're certainly happy to integrate with those as well, but this one works right out of the box. So I'm going to stop there, and I am going to hand over to Justin Garrison, the product manager for Trust Visitor.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll share my screen in a moment here, but I see that there's a lot of people on the call, almost 100, and I imagine everyone listening has been on dozens, if not hundreds of calls like this, and each time, inevitably, there's a portion of the call when a product person gets the mic and says something along the lines of, we've made big changes to the look and feel of our product. So folks, we have now reached that portion of this call. I've said those words myself when I worked for a different company, of course, knowing fully well that, it's not really much of a change. But as you'll soon see, the version of Trust Visitor that I'm about to show you is dramatically different. In fact, if you're familiar with the Trust Visitor user interface from prior versions, this is going to look like a completely new product. And I'd like to just set the stage a bit before jumping into the new UI, because everything we built was done with the end user in mind. So who are the users? Well, we all know there's the visitors and the lobby personnel that receive them, a lobby guard. High assurance visitor management adds a visitor sponsor. That's the person who schedules the event, sets the event location, and of course invites the visitors. And there's security and location approvers who determine whether the visitor should be allowed on site. Now there's always an admin user managing settings behind the scenes, but the visitor, guard, sponsor, and approvers are the main people using Trust Visitor. So during this demo, I'll take you through the experience for each user so that you can see how the end-to-end process looks in our new release. So let's go on with the show here. I am now sharing my screen. The first thing I'd like to show you is this new Lobby Guard interface. And then we'll go through the sponsor and visitor and approver experience. And I'll toggle back to this Lobby Guard UI throughout the process so that you can see how it all ties together. But what I'm showing you now is a view of visitor cards, where all the visitors who've been invited to the facility are represented with a card, or you might think of this as a badge. We do have another view, just a list view that you could toggle to, just the same info on list format. But let's go back to the card view. You'll notice some cards have a photo, some do not. The reason for that is because if a visitor registered with us previously with a smart card, we can use that photo for the next event, even if they've not registered. Once they do register with a smart card, the photo will appear, and we'll show that even for visitors that are pending registration. And if I scroll down just a little bit, you can see that, yeah, we use colors and icons to communicate the important information to the guard. For example, anyone currently in the workflow is going to have this orangish color with their current status displayed. Approved visitors have a green border, and naturally reject it as read. It is possible to have an employee as a visitor, and we always use a blue border. So that's this guy right here. We'll use a blue border to indicate to the guard that this is an employee, but they'll have this visitor watermark so that they know it's an employee as a visitor in this situation. A couple more things to show you here. US citizens, they'll have the US flag icon. You can even hover over and see what state they're from. If you're a non-US citizen, like Vic Ferrari, he's probably from Italy. Yeah, from Italy. They will have the globe icon. Also, to help our clients deal with the coronavirus concerns, we have this travel icon, this little suitcase here, to indicate whether the visitor traveled outside the US in 2020. So there's a lot here. We'll come back to this and get into a little more detail, but the value that I'm trying to convey here is the ability for a guard to see the status of their visitors kind of at a glance, all on one page without having to navigate to a bunch of different paths in the UI to be able to find what they're looking for. It's all here, clean, simple, intuitive. But how do we get to the point where all of this is populated in the UI? Let's start at the beginning of the process, which is where the sponsor creates the invite. And the sponsor is just going to go to their calendar tool to do this. The sponsor is just going to use their usual calendar tool, and that's pretty much it. They go here, create an invite, create a meeting, just like they always would, like they have to for any meeting that they're having. Pick a location, add the visitors, and then they simply add Trust Visitor as an attendee and hit send. Trust Visitor is then going to receive this invite, and the first thing we're going to do is send a confirmation email back to the sponsor. And that looks like this. Any communication, any notification or email that Trust Visitor sends out is always going to have this blue background, something to alert the reader to, oh, this is from Trust Visitor. Anytime I see this bluish, slate blue background, this is a Trust Visitor generated notification. And in this case, what we do is list all the visitors that were part of the invite. This means any attendees who do not have access to the event location. And again, this could include employees. If someone was invited who already has access, we don't list them as a visitor. They're fine, they're good to go. Now, the intent of this email is to show the sponsor, yeah, Trust Visitor received the request, and it's nice, but the sponsor could also take action here. And if I scroll down to the bottom a bit, there are some commands where the sponsor can get a little more information. All the sponsor has to do is reply and type in pound status. That's what this more information that's highlighted here is. Anytime the sponsor can reply to this email, type in pound status and hit send, and Trust Visitor is going to respond back with an email showing the status of each user. A couple other things they could do. There's a resend option. Think of a scenario like this. The sponsor sent out the invite. The visitor received a link to register, pre-register for the event, and they ignored it. And the sponsor, the day before the big meeting, looked at the status and saw, oh, John Smith did not register yet. They're still in pending registration. Perhaps the sponsor gives that visitor a call, and the visitor says, I can't find it in my email. Well, all the sponsor has to do is select reply to this email, type resend and enter the email address for that visitor, and Trust Visitor will resend the visit registration link, which I'll demo shortly here. Also, there's an ignore command. If the sponsor made a mistake and added Trust Visitor as an attendee and really shouldn't have, they can do a pound ignore to remove the event from Trust Visitor and stop all the processing. So that's how this works. The idea here is to really let sponsors get whatever they need to do done quickly and easily. There's no real new process to learn here. There's not a lot of training other than, hey, add Trust Visitor to your invites. There's no new ID or new password that the sponsor has to add to their long list of IDs for all the different applications they have to get in. They don't have to bookmark a new site. They're not really logging into Trust Visitor to get anything done. So once our product identifies the visitors from the calendar invite, it will send them a registration link. And that looks like this. So now I'm the visitor. I'm looking at a notification that I received from Trust Visitor that's letting me know I was invited to an event. I should pre-register. And this is the event information. Here's when it's happening. If I want to pre-register for this event, it's very simple. I just click the link and it's going to open up our visitor registration page. When they get to this page, we give visitors the option to either register using an existing credential that they registered with before. That would be this example here, where I've registered previously for other events using a PIV or a passport or a driver's license. I can pick any of these to use again for this new event. Or I can submit a new smart card and have that inserted into my device, read by the application, and register a new smart card for this event. Or I could use a new government ID. In this case, I'm just going to use my PIV. I will select that. The value here is Trust Visitor does a few things. We want to make this quick and easy for the visitor, of course. So we're going to pre-populate all of the information that we have from the previous registration that we have on file for this visitor. A few things to call out here. Yeah, they can always override some of this information if their address changed, things like that. There is a green check that is important. What this means is in real time, Trust Visitor has validated this credential. If my PIV had been revoked or for whatever reason could not be used, I would not be able to continue. So in real time, we know this visitor credential is going to work for my visit. And there's a couple more things. It's possible to have agreements added to a location that you would like to have a customer to sign before their visit. Maybe just an NDA. You can attach that. That'll show up on visit registration. The visitor can review it and either accept or reject. I'm going to go ahead and accept. In addition to some of the personal information, we do have this thing that we added in response to COVID that I mentioned earlier with that suitcase icon. This is how that icon gets populated in the UI. We have a question at the bottom of the registration here that asks the visitor if they've traveled outside the US at any time during 2020. This is something that can actually be configured. Clients can change this to a different type of question if they like for a yes/no response, and we'd be able to capture that. And that's it. Really just one or two clicks. Click the submit button, and Trust Visitor is going to process this, give me a success screen, and it's going to remind me that I need to bring this PIV card to the event. I'm going to need that to access the facilities. Okay, pretty simple process for the visitors. What's next in the process? Well, now that the visitor has registered, they go into the approval workflow. So similar to the sponsor experience, this is going to be done via email. So let's take a look at what that looks like here. All right, I'm going to show you an example of a visitor named Eric. Those of you on the call, there's at least a couple of you who know that this is actually the name of Magneto from X-Men. Magneto's kind of a bad guy and he's done some bad things. Once the visitor, Eric in this case, registers, their registration information is sent automatically to the approval queue via email. The approver, whether it's the security officer or a location approver, is going to bring this up, open the email. They'll see all of their registration information. They'll see what event they've registered for, where and when it's happening, who's the sponsor email in case they need to get in touch with them quickly. And then we have this background check. And in this example, Eric's been caught with quite a few things in our Fed check background check, these sirens, these alerts that come up. So yeah, as a security officer, I'm probably not letting this guy into my facility. So how do I just quickly and easily reject this person as an approver? Similar to the experience for a sponsor, the approver doesn't have to go in and find a a different bookmark and find the trust visitor and look up their ID and password and figure out how to log in and navigate to Eric and approve or reject. All they have to do is simply reply to this email with one of these commands. If they want to approve, it's #approve. If they want to say, I approve, but this person really should have an escort accompany them throughout their visit, then it's #escort. And if they want to reject the visitor, as we would do with Eric here, it would be #reject. Now, we do require comments if an escort is required and if you're doing a reject command. And those we'll see will get populated in the UI. So let's go back. I did mention something that a sponsor could do before we jump back into the Guard UI. There was that notification that the sponsor received. And let's say I just want to see the status. I invited a lot of people. I simply do a #status. And what Trust Visitor is going to send me is this status reply. This is where, for the event, I get a summary of my event and location and time. And it's going to show me the status of my visitors. I have a couple that aren't approved and that are not quite ready to go through. One's been rejected. That was Eric. Looks like 2 haven't registered. One's still in the approvals queue. And I have 3 that are approved for the visit. Again, we do remind them of a resend command or the ignore command. And so that's the type of information we would like to communicate to a sponsor. We don't want to spam a sponsor with all of these approval notifications. We really want to leave this up to the sponsor to pull this information when they need it. So the #status command would do that as a interactive tool via email. Again, getting more information without having to navigate into the Trust Visitor product. All right, let's go back to the Lobby Guard UI. So the process where the sponsor sends an invite, the visitor registers, and the approvers make a decision is how all the stuff in this view gets populated. With that in mind, let's just take a closer look. If the visitor, registered with a smart card, a PIV, PIV-I, or a CAC, then we'll display this icon. This is a smart card icon. That way you know that this person did register with a smart card. If the visitor does not have this icon, it means that they registered with a driver's license or a passport, and they either intend to register their smart card at the lobby, or more likely, they will need a temporary badge assigned to them when they arrive. Of course, we will display some basic information, event information and time, some sponsor contact information that you can use as a hover over here. And if this, Guard wants to just dig in a little bit deeper, how do they do that? Well, each card here is actually an interactive element. So if you click on one, I'm going to select Kunduz here. It's sort of like a Swiss Army knife. A Guard can read some comments associated with the visitor by opening what we call these flyouts here. There's also approval information. So the comments are at the visitor level. Approvals, you could read any information associated with the specific event related to approvals. The Guard can also see whether or not the agreement was signed by the visitor for the event. We also have some badge actions that can be taken. You can see how the visitor registered. In this case, it was with the driver's license. And they either need to have a temp badge assigned or they want to register their smart card. And depending on their status, there's another action that the Guard can take. For example, because Kunduz is in approved status, the Guard can mark her as arrived. So that's the interactive element of these cards. There is one other thing I'd like to show you here, and hopefully this doesn't happen too often, but if a visitor is being disruptive or violent, the Guard can flip to the back of this card, this cool little animation here, and add them to the do not admit list. This is going to remove any approvals they may have. It's It's going to require a comment. That can be added so that other guards can see. And now their status gets updated to do not admit. And it's reflected in the UI. Let's just take a quick look behind the scenes here to show how Trust Visitor created these cards using the Secure and Enometrics APIs. Let me show you a visitor. This is going to be Anna Bolin. This is actually what the location approver notification looks like. Again, it's very similar to what a security officer sees. The only difference is the background check details are just going to show pass or fail, whereas for the security officer, it listed all of the details. If they failed, it listed all of the sirens or alerts or parts of the background check that were failed. And it's a very simple action here to approve. Hit approve and send. Now let me go back into the UI. And I'm going to search for Anna. And she's been approved. The event is actually in progress for an event that's happening now. And if we toggle over into the Secure 9000 admin station, I see Anna's name is populated here. And if I look at the details, I can see that we have her credential, where it's her PIV card, and she's cleared for the specific location, Weston 101. All right, so this card view has a lot of nice features. It's aesthetically pleasing, but what happens if a location has a, let's say, relatively high number of visitors for the day? Maybe it's a convention that's happening, whatever it is, the guard needs to find someone quickly. Well, rather than scrolling through the card view, the guard can just enter the visitor's name in the search field in the top menu, as I just did for Anna. If you just know their first name, you can type that in as well. This is going to show you all of the events for this individual person. So for example, Selleck has 3 events that she's scheduled for. What if they want to find visitors that are scheduled for a specific date range? Well, we have an advanced search. Let's say I want to see everything from the 28th to the 29th. Let's include employees here and do a search for that. This is going to give me a very specific results set. And if I want to filter these results, we have a very robust filtering option here, where the guard could filter their results by the event location or title or sponsor or visitor name, also by status. Maybe they want to just see a list of people who are going to require a temp badge, or the US citizens versus non-US. Perhaps they just want to see, hey, show me everybody that's said they traveled outside the US in 2020. That's probably going to be a popular one now. So let's just say I want to find everybody that's in approved status that's not a US citizen for now. And it'll filter down your results from there. So it's a very robust set of features that we have for the guard that we tried to display in a simple and intuitive way. For the most part, the quick search and just going to one card, sort of a one-stop shop to find all the information that you need about a visitor and take actions based on their status, is what we hope is going to be the most beneficial feature of the UI. So our goal here with Trust Visitor 3.0 was we really wanted to create the best experience for each person in the process. The sponsors, they want the easy stuff to be easy. Sending an invite to a visitor should be easy. And with Trust Visitor, now it's just as easy as including Trust Visitor in a calendar invite. Registering for an event as a visitor should be easy. And most visitors can register with us in 2 or 3 clicks. The approvers, well, they need specific visitor details, and they have that sent to them automatically via notification with a quick and simple way to mark a visitor as approved, escort required, or rejected. And for guards, well, their eyes ought to be on the people in the lobby, not on their monitor hunting for visitor information. And with the new UI, guards and visitors benefit from having the most secure and fastest check-in experience possible. So that's everything I have to show for you here. I want to thank you for your time and for allowing me to present the highlights of Trust Visitor 3.0. I will say we're far from done. We have a product roadmap full of some really cool ideas and improvements. We're here to deliver the best high assurance visitor management solution in the market. And we really do look forward to accomplishing just that through our partnership with all of you. So thank you all very much.
Okay, just checking to see if there is an opportunity for people to ask questions online. If you have some, maybe you can type them in. Otherwise, I'll just spend a couple of seconds talking about what is the applicability for this outside of the US federal government. So I mentioned that we've installed Trust Visitor now at a number of highly regulated companies. So what we're finding is that those companies that have higher security requirements. Energy companies are a really good example of this, especially at NERC facilities. They are being asked if they can for the auditors to accept their PIV cards. That's an interesting use case. But even if it is a visitor that doesn't have a credential, to be able to loan them a credential that has two-factor capability. So if you are somebody who is either serving a client that has two-factor requirements, or you are a facility that has two-factor requirements, this can be a really powerful way to quickly get those credentials provisioned to the PACs, and then just as quickly to get them taken out without there being any administrative burden to doing that. Because of course it's all done, as you've seen, within the workflow of approving somebody to be there. So this is designed to be a high compliance sort of solution as well, in addition to the security benefit. And I think in security, we don't very often find things that are both better security and easier to use. And so that's been a major challenge for us to tackle, was how do we actually make it easier to do better security things in the lobby? Certainly being able to interact with your visitors before they show up, that's a huge deal. Being able to understand, are they coming with a credential that will be able to be recognized on site, or is it going to be some form of government issued ID that we need to start thinking about how to process right now? That's all really, really useful stuff to try to do before people show up. And it also vastly reduces the line length. We've done a number of traffic studies now in different, typically federal facilities, that's true, just because those were the early adopters. But we are, for people who register ahead of time, now reducing the amount of time it takes for them to check in and get through the lobby from what has been obviously minutes and minutes and minutes, especially if it's at 8:59 a.m. in the morning. We're now averaging about 10 seconds. So that's a really, really good sort of return on investment metric to know, that we're not putting people in such a position that they feel like they have to circumvent their security policy to move people through the lobby as quickly as possible when there's high demand times. And the other thing now is that we're having to figure out how to adjust to a post-COVID world where we don't want there to be a lot of close interaction between your lobby personnel and the visitors necessarily. So again, being able to ask health questions, Justin showed you a question about have you traveled, that could just as easily say, do you have a fever? Have you had a fever? What's your pulse ox? Whatever you like. But you can ask questions like that, and to the extent that your visitors answer yes to them, obviously you're seeing that we're going to make that information available to your meeting approvers and to your lobby guards so that they can make risk-based decisions. So we think that's really important stuff as well as part of a visitor management program. So let me stop there. I don't know if anybody from JCI has the ability to facilitate any questions, but otherwise, I think that's the majority of the information we wanted to convey today, other than just to quickly point out that that was Secure 2.8 Service Pack 2 with the latest edition of Enometrics on the Ultra controllers that you were looking at.
And Jeff, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. So we do have a couple questions that came in for your team. The first question here, what are the different watch lists and does that cost extra?
Yeah, so the watch list is it's a list inside of the product itself that users can populate. So it's not necessarily that it's like the FBI's most wanted. That's not what it is. It's a means by which you can have your own watch list, your own bolos. Most large companies have something like that, but it's typically today implemented as an Excel spreadsheet or a scrapbook. I've seen any number of things like that. So this is a way that as visitors start to type in their information, and I don't want to go into great lengths about this, but we are moving towards, with each iteration of Trust Visitor, towards something called visitor reputation. And so we are building a lot of logic to help us understand, once we've seen someone, how likely is it that someone we're seeing subsequent to that really is the same person we saw before. When we did this for the General Services Administration, they shared with us that they have had some unfortunate situations where, and I'll just give the exact example that was given to us. It's not biased, it's just an anecdote, that they had some custodial staff that had, had taken some items. And so these persons were excused from employment, as you would expect. However, after just a couple of months, they managed to come back under a different janitorial provider at buildings literally just around the corner, but also managed by GSA, where they then took some more stuff. And so, of course, the question becomes, isn't there a means to deal with that? And so that is one of the reasons that you might have a watch list, and that's one of the ways that Trust Visitor can help by saying, this person's name is awfully similar, or this credential is a little different, but we think we've seen this before. And so with that, we'll build a level of confidence. We're not surfacing it in the product yet. We're not quite ready to do that, but that is what we're going to today. Or the future. Where we are today is this Boolean: are they on the list or aren't they?
Okay, thank you. The next question we have here is the Trust Visitor hosted by CertiPath, or can we host the application in our own data centers?
That's a great question. Forgive us for not having answered that during the demo. We certainly should have. That is something where, from a security perspective, we have elected that the customer or their agent should host it. So we are, you saw a very short demonstration of Trust Monitor. That's a cloud-hosted solution. A lot of the software developed is cloud-hosted. But in this case, because we integrate with the physical access control system, we integrate with Active Directory, we integrate with your mail server, that a lot of people aren't ready to jump and put something that's that security sensitive into the cloud. And we're not trying to force anybody to make those radical decisions. We're first and foremost trying to make sure that you've got security around your visitor management. So yeah, we typically get hosted right next to where your PACS is.
Wonderful, thank you. And how is badge inventory handled through Trust Visitor?
Yes, obviously, if we're talking about the either employees or visitors who have their own badge, it's not, right? And that's sort of the whole point. But if you are referring to, and I suspect the question was, what about the temporary cards that I might give a visitor, the temporary cards that I might give an employee? Those get registered to the system ahead of time. And then they're put into typically some sort of locking drawer. That's what we see most customers do. Nobody wants to see their smart cards walk away, but from a security perspective, I'm here to tell you, you don't have to lock the drawer. Now, that may sound like a radical statement, but I mean it from the perspective that that is a good card, but it's a good card that has exactly 0 privileges until it's linked to a person and a visit through the approval process. And by visit, I mean a location and a time. And that's a really important concept in high assurance visitor management. It literally means that my entire drawer of tokens, probably what you're accustomed to is say being prox tokens that are live or hot all the time, not so in high assurance. In high assurance, it's 15 minutes before the meeting starts and 15 minutes after the meeting ends, although that's configurable, and only once it's been associated with an individual. So the person arrives, whether they registered or not, but let's say that they're now approved. When your lobby guard says, okay, well, I now am going to assign badge, and they tap it to the reader, that is the first moment that that card now has any ability to open a turnstile or open a door whatsoever. So I don't want you to think that the cards are walking around like golden tickets. They aren't at all. They're purely identifiers, and only as is needed are they then turned into authenticators for access.
Okay, perfect. And next we have, is there a kiosk application for self-check-in or on-site registration if the visitor did not respond to the email?
There is not a kiosk today. However, you will not be surprised to hear that that is exactly what we're working on. So as soon as COVID came out, a couple of the customers that I had on that logo chart said, and we're going to need a kiosk now. We don't want you interacting with we don't want people interacting with our guards quite so much. So yes, we are actively working on that right now.
Wonderful. And what if access control is separate from the Active Directory?
Well, okay. I guess I have to think about what that means. I mean, obviously, authorization, or what a lot of people would call access control, is actually being mediated by the physical access control system itself, and that's what we expect. The only thing that we are using Active Directory for is to understand which of your employees are going to have a privileged role inside of Trust Visitor itself. So nothing to do with permissions being granted in the PACS, just to make sure that that's clear. So if I'm somebody who can do background check approvals, I'm able to do that because I'm in a group inside of Active Directory that gives me the ability to do that, and gives me the ability to do that potentially only for a certain location, not necessarily globally, although it could be global as well. Same thing with a location site approver for a visit, same thing with that lobby guard role. But otherwise, most of your employees will just be in a group where they can either invite visitors, or maybe they're in a group where they explicitly can't invite visitors. And that is mediated as well by Active Directory groups, but of course it's behind the scenes, and none of your users will ever really know that. There's something in US federal government speak called FICAM, and without going into great lengths, that is the FICAM compliant way to do authorization or access control to an application nowadays. I understand that physical access control, that is literally the purpose of that product, so it doesn't pertain to that. But in terms of your privileged roles, you're supposed to do it with what are known as, LDAP, or Identity Management System, IDMS groups. We talk a lot about Active Directory, but in reality, it's about knowing that you've got all of your users in some sort of user store, typically in an LDAP compatible way, and that we can look at that to understand who are the privileged people and who aren't the privileged people.
Okay.
Yep.
And can you talk a little bit more about handling employees such as forgotten badges? So when issuing a temp badge, does it turn off their normal badge?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I've got a good answer. So the way that it works is your supposed employee, let's be paranoid about it, they show up in the lobby and say, hey, I forgot my badge, it's in my gym bag. I have been in lobbies and watch people say exactly that, which is why I like to use that. But they'll say almost anything. The one thing they won't say is, I've lost it, I have no idea where it is, I'm never going to find it, you might as well go ahead and revoke it now, right? That nobody ever says that, at least not on day one. So there needs to be a way to deal with, how do I believe this person, at least initially, that they're going to find their badge. But now that they have told me they're not in control, not in physical possession of their badge, to do something intelligent about that. So exactly as the person who asked the question said, we go in, and that secure window that Justin showed would have been a great place to show it. What happens is that the badge, their regular employee badge, will be disabled. The new temporary employee badge is added. It's now active. And because it's added to the person, all the clearance levels that worked with their employee badge now obviously work with the temporary card. And I think I said it, but say it one more time, we absolutely disable the employee badge for so long as that temporary badge is enabled. Because of course, it makes no sense to have two credentials, one that we already know is not under the physical possession of its owner, floating around in the wild, right? Because they probably dropped it in the parking lot and somebody probably picked it up. And if you're in one-factor reader mode, that's not a good day. So yes, we are actively dealing with that problem. And to the best of my knowledge, I think it's the first time that's being addressed, at least that way. The other thing this does is, from a reporting perspective, it gives us an ability to start to understand trends as it relates to people who have not had their badge for multiple days. Now, you might force people to turn their temporary card in every day, fine. Not everybody does that. Sometimes they say, well, when you bring me back your actual card and give me back your temporary card, that's when we'll reverse, or we'll do the card flip. And of course, the system will do the card flip, but we're interested in sort of the intelligence of how do I go and understand across my 20,000 employees who hasn't had physical possession of their card for 48 hours, 72 hours, right? And so that becomes a really useful security tool as well, because we're now acting as quite literally the front gate of card control or credential control. Yeah, it was a great question.
Perfect. So if at the end of the day I have outstanding badges, is there any way for me to check who the badge was issued to?
I'm sorry, you broke up just a bit. So you said at the end of the day, is there a way to check what?
If there's outstanding badges, is there a way to check who that badge was issued to?
To understand who didn't return a badge?
Correct.
Well, I will be completely honest with you. That's such a new feature. I am trying to look at it right now and see if that's in there. Yeah, yes, there is a, it's brand new for 3.0. There is a report to show who didn't turn their badge back in. Now, keep in mind, from a security perspective, it doesn't matter. The badge was dead 15 minutes after their meeting. It doesn't do anything anymore. But obviously, I take your point. You don't want all your badges walking out the door and you don't know who had which one. 100% understood. That's when you run the report, just to your question. So yes.
Perfect. And what's the licensing model? Is it per user, per site?
Yeah, so we did it very differently, I think, than what most people are accustomed to. Myself included, who started life as a chief information security officer for 10 years. All of us who work on this came from the user side. And we definitely know what we like and what we didn't like when it comes to licensing. So we decided to make this as absolutely simple as we could. So we don't want a licensing model that discourages you from using this with your visitors. So charging you by location or charging by number of visitors seems completely backwards to us. Who's getting the value from a visitor management system is actually the employees, who don't have to worry about making sure that their visitors registered in advance, or making sure their visitors signed all the appropriate NDAs or documents, or that they told their visitors about the weird parking situation. Trust Visitor does all of that for you. And if it's your unlucky day and you as an employee forgot your badge, well, then Trust Visitor is going to help you with that as well. So we charge by the number of employees who are going to be interacting with Trust Visitor. And we don't charge for PACS connectors. We don't charge for other connectors to other things. Not surprisingly, there is a charge for FedCheck because that's a service, but we're not charging for the connector there either. We just have this, one-time cost. Of course, there's maintenance like there is with any other software, but we just have this one-time cost. It's a perpetual software license based on the number of employees you have, and typically you get that number out of your Active Directory or whatever your IDMS is. So we think we have gotten as much positive feedback about that model as we have probably the product.
Perfect. And it looks like the last question we have here, what kind of auditing tool does Trust Visitor have if I wanted to know who's been in the facility for, say, the last 30 days?
So we are not trying to replace the functionality of the PACS itself. So you can absolutely go and understand everything that had anything to do with visitors being invited, being approved, being disapproved, who got what badge, all of that you can get through Trust Visitor and its reports. And if there's something that we don't report on, then we give you access to the SQL database so that you can create a custom report. Although if you are doing that, we want to know about it because we'll probably just make it a canned report in a future version. We're still soliciting a lot of customer feedback on more reports to include. But once the badge is used with the access control system, we are not going back to Secure and saying, hey, which doors did this badge get used on? Or did the visitor go and try their badge on a bunch of doors they shouldn't have? That you should still do through Secure. It's the source of truth for that, and it's better at reporting on that anyway.
Perfect. Thank you. So it looks like that's the end of our questions, and we're at the top of the hour here. So
yeah, those are great questions.
Yeah, I, again, want to thank the CertiPath team for joining us today. This was a great webinar, and I think a really great demonstration on how the Trust Visitor works, especially with our Secure 9000 platform. So thank you again so much for taking your time to hop on and provide this robust demonstration for us. As mentioned earlier, the webinar is recorded, so we'll go ahead and send out a follow-up email that includes the link for all the attendees. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day and rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.